So just a little bit about us. We started as just a little commercial roofing company, and we started realizing that on a lot of roofs, the air conditioners were up on the roof back. Some of you aren't as old as I am, but when I got down here in the early 80s, every roof was on a 4x4 wood sleeper with a pitch pan. Well, the code changed, and now we had to raise it. And one thing I found when I came to Florida is like I can't get any service from anybody, you know. So it really instilled to me that to get and grow a company, a service business in Florida, really wasn't that hard. Do what you say you're going to do. I mean, and that we instilled that and do quality work. So we started out roofing, went to HVAC quickly. Lightning protection was another natural. Most of the roofs had that. We got one of the most lightning states in the country. And then repairs and maintenance, you know, that's great. It's a service that once you get a client, they're a client, you know, and then when their roof comes up, it's an opportunity for roofing. Roof asset management plan, you know, take care of that roof. It's like changing an oil in a car. You always mark how many miles you go. Same thing with roofs. Every 6 months you should be doing it. And most recently, the electric division was added to our solar division. We got into solar in '07, and we became one of the largest in the country, top 50, and top #1 in rooftop solar in the state on roofing and solar the last several years. And the last is the coatings. You know, we're going to talk about that today. I've been doing coatings since I was in high school. We used to paint coating roofs, aluminum coating. We didn't have as much as the whites. Everything was reflective aluminum coating, and then resaturants, where we take an old built up roof, take the gravel off, and put this resaturant on a fluid applied that would make the life go longer. But you're going to hear some really good information on coatings. And we talked about the COVID budgeting tools when considering a coating. You'll see that. What roof qualifies for a roof? You don't want to take a roof that's been leaking, patched, holds water. You're going to learn about what ones qualify, and especially on the commercial side of it. And in application techniques, it's like anything. The devil's in the details. 80% of litigation is in flashings and perimeters. Well, why is that? That's where it takes the most skill set to put a roof on, is in the flashing and sheet metal and application techniques. And we have a quality control department that just goes out and checks quality control. We have a safety department that just does safety. So quality is very important to it. And then some tips and tricks for perfect roof coating. And I believe I'm introducing Richard next. First of all, I got a full disclosure. Richard is a very close friend of mine. He's in my Vistage group. I've known him as a vendor first, and then as a close friend lately, over 30 years. And you're going to hear his expertise. He has 3 manufacturing plants around the country, and he's really in the top 3 coating manufacturers that are professional, not just mom and pop. So Richard, take us away.
Thank you very much, Rob. I'm delighted to be here. It's an honor to present for Advanced Roofing because we have a national stature. We have the ability to serve a lot of roofing contractors, and it's just really a pleasure to do business with. Besides Rob being a friend, they run an excellent company, very demanding of his folks, and he understands quality and integrity. So our 2 companies dovetail together very, very nicely. I moved to Florida 42 years ago, at the same time my mom and my dad was out of work and 65 years old. We ended up taking this very small little company. It was me, my mom, my dad, and 2 guys outside. And we started making roofing mastics to repair and restore old asphalt roofing systems. Turned out we really loved the business and we were able to grow it, and we understood that there was an opening in the professional side of the business, not retail, but in the professional side of the business to take existing roofing systems and make them last longer. Make through a variety of different products, be they asphalt cements to fix them, to, as Rob mentioned, aluminum roof coatings. We've since then segued into acrylic and silicone coatings that really protect, prolong the life cycle of a roofing system. We feel that between the economics of these type systems, the ease of application of these systems, the social distancing of the applicators of these systems, that now is an absolutely perfect time for quality property owners to let good companies take a look at their roofing asset and protect them. You can double the length of a roof's life by being proactive in its restoration and its maintenance. Obviously, as Rob said, not all roofs are good for this, but if you've got a quality roofing contractor and they can watch your roof age and they can continue, just like you're making your car go over 150, 200,000 miles on its engine. It's a matter of taking great care of it, and it's a matter of always attending to the details.
Before we start, we're going to have a little quick poll. Everyone should see a polling option from the bottom of your screen. We'll take about 30 seconds to let everyone respond, and then we'll show the poll. This one's an easy one to get us kicked off started. They get a little harder as we go along. So this is a give me. So it looks like, sharing the results here, 96% said true, and we got a 4% false.
Well, the good news is most people in the poll have the right answer, and we're going to talk a little bit about why over 95% of you said, yes, we can save energy through coating systems, and hopefully create believers, like Kevin mentioned, out of the rest of you that maybe don't believe. As we start defining what a cool roof is and what a warm roof is, a cool roof is by definition is anything that can reflect up to and over 80% of the energy that's transmitted from the sun down to earth every day. In opposition and contrast to that, warm roofs, traditional roofing systems really reflect less than 20% of the sun's energy, which means that that remaining 80% is actually absorbed into the roof system and then transmitted into the structure and the building, into the living space itself, which really relates to increased energy bills, heating of the structure and the building itself. And so the roof coating, just by its reflective nature, can really drastically reduce energy costs associated with operating a building. We liken it to a lot like putting a sunscreen on. When you look at sunscreen, it's able to reflect UV rays, protect the skin. We're also protecting the roof membrane by putting on these coatings. Every coating has a different application, but the majority of commercial coatings in today's market are all highly reflective, and some of them perform better in different conditions, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. So what is the background of a roof coating? Coatings can extend our roof systems up to 20 years. It's important to know that we consider this to be an extension of a roof system, not necessarily something that can bring back a roof from a dead condition or a condition that can no longer be maintained. Coatings are tax deductible in their first year. So this is a maintenance expense, not necessarily a capital expense, something that has to be depreciated over time. You can recoup this expense through tax deductions all in the first year. We talked about lowering energy costs through reflectivity, and then the ability to extend these warranties. If we do a 5 or a 10-year coating system, many coating systems can then be built upon after that term is up and simply recoated to give you another extension past that initial 5, 10, even 20-year term if it's properly maintained and the condition is there. Some strengths of roof coatings in opposition to full roof replacements: much less disruption to the tenants of the building, to the building itself, smaller setup areas, less noise, less potential for water intrusion through the replacement process. The initial investment can be much less. I think it's important to look at how that plays out over time and life cycle cost. Sometimes coatings can be a much cheaper option throughout the life cycle. Sometimes it's a re-roof that fits, and it really just depends on the situation and the goals. Locations of leaks and cost to repair these leaks can be less expensive under a re-roof. Meaning it's pretty easy to find leaks inside a coating system. And then this high solar reflectance, which really rolls back into the ability for us to lower our energy costs and get a more efficient building. Our HVACs have to run less under a reflective condition. We have much less heat gain in the building. Some of the challenges, like we said before, if a roof is to that point that it can no longer be maintained, it often isn't a candidate for a coating. Excessive moisture trapped into a roof system, flashings that are deteriorated to a point to where they can't be held together any longer. Some of these things are big challenges that coatings just simply can't overcome. And some of our coating systems do have odor. So there's solvent-based coating systems. Some of these systems need catalysts and two-part components that create odors. So that can also be a concern, but it's usually something that can be mitigated through charcoal filters or closing off air intakes. We can work around them, but it's something to know. Building types where we can apply these, we're going to see that it's just about every commercial roofing system out in the industry, with the exception of the built-up roofs that have gravel surfacing. Not modified bitumen, but built-up roofs. Some built-up roofs are just too granular to coat and too difficult to coat. As we kind of look at a roof assembly very quickly, you'll see your traditional built-up roof assembly, structural deck, insulation package, waterproofing membrane in that traditional built-up assembly. That coating system is really just going on top of that existing membrane. And there's either two goals here. One, to extend the life of the existing roof that's there through providing that sunscreen that we talked about, or two, to create a secondary roof system and waterproofing system on top of that membrane that would also extend it, but then also does provide this additional layer of waterproofing. Different types of coatings can meet those goals, and it's important to know what type of coating that we're going to get. So as we move into the types of coatings and applications, you see some real brief ways that we're applying coatings into the market right now. On your left, you see your traditional roller application. Center is a spray application. On the right is simple brush grade application, which is typically used in detail situations, window sills, door thresholds, penetrations. Every application has its use, and this is really geared towards the building itself. Is there a lot of cars, open edges? If so, spraying might not be the best case scenario. The last thing we want to do is have overspray in a windy day, coating a car. So we need to look at a roller application. Is it a wide open warehouse where we're not going to have these concerns? Can we spray? Because efficiencies can come up with spray, but really the building and the use of the building dictates the type of application that we're going to talk about. So when we look at coating types in today's commercial market, the majority of the coatings on the market fall into one of these four categories, and they all have their strengths. I think it's important to know, and we'll talk about it a little later as well, is every product here has its place. It has a very important place, and it's all about performance and specifications. You look at your silicones, highly reflective, very good tensile strength, extremely strong performers in ponding water in this middle range investment. In opposition to that, acrylics, right? Highly reflective again, very low tensile strength, very poor performance in ponding water as a water-based coating. And then, but they have this low grade investment as well, initial investment. And then urethanes and PMMAs in between. You can tell that they all have their strengths. They also all have some weaknesses, and it's all about finding the right coating for the application that you're looking for. So as we dive a little bit deeper and we start talking about acrylics, acrylics are water-based coatings. What does that mean? Very easy to clean up, very easy to apply, low initial cost, high reflectivity. They're good for most climates, and they often have a great value proposition. But what they don't provide is the actual waterproofing itself. Being a water-based coating system, these coatings actually erode and wear just by giving up some millage of every time it rains. A small amount of this coating will essentially wash away and oxidize off. If you were to apply this coating and before it was fully cured, get caught in a rainfall, the entire coating would end up down the drain. So while they're very good at providing that sunscreen effect and extending the life of an existing roof, they're also very good under metal roofs. They're not very good at creating a waterproofing membrane. They perform very poorly in ponding water situations. If they are applied in areas where we have ponding water or poor drainage, you'll see that coating peeling up and delaminating within 1-2 years. If you are lucky, it could be even faster. So where are these coatings applicable? Where are they used often? These are used in roofs that have very good positive drainage, no ponding, and where you're not looking for a weatherproofing solution as much as you are looking for a roof life extension solution, an energy efficiency solution. And because if we need to get into that weatherproofing, waterproofing conversation, we're looking at a different set of coatings entirely. And that brings us into silicones. Silicones, in opposition to your acrylic coatings, have a high performance underneath ponding water areas. Essentially, they're a moisture cured coating application. 95% solids means that basically 95% of what we're putting down remains in the roof system. We'll get into the science of solids and what that means for coating systems over time. But the strengths of a silicone are better weathering over time with almost zero erosion. They can be put down in a single coat application because of their chemical makeup and their high solids content. They're very good under ponding water, low slope, poor drainage situations. They create that waterproofing membrane and give you the reflectivity as well. One of the challenges is they do tend to weather over time. And that's primarily because of the way that they weather. We talked a little bit earlier about how acrylics actually lose a little bit of their application thickness every time it rains, a little bit, tiny bit every day, weathers and moves on. Silicone doesn't do that. So because it sticks very well and never weathers, whatever does get onto the top of the membrane will remain. So we do see silicones weather over time. They lose a little bit of reflectivity. So it's important that we understand what the initial reflectivity is and then what the aged reflectivity is. That gives you an indication as to, okay, on day one when we put it down, it reflects 97%. It looks phenomenal. On day 500, it might be closer to 80%. It's important to know that. It can puncture easily. We have a great tensile strength, which means it can pull and stretch and withstand the thermal movements inside roof systems. But the given to that is that it can puncture easily. Where does silicone roof systems, coating systems being applicable, where are they really best suited? Any commercial roofing type, building type out there can take a silicone roof system. They don't have that ponding water limitation. They're highly reflective. They can go onto single plies, metals, modified bitumens. The one thing we would want to make sure of, and we're going to talk a little bit later, is that it's a qualifying roof assembly, that the moisture content is low enough, that the adhesion testing is going to come back properly, and that the roof can sustain this new coating system. So as we move into polyurethanes, we now start talking about a higher end coating product, a product that's really used where we need to be able to stay durable to foot traffic, to vehicular traffic. These are the coatings that go out and you see them on parking garages, you see them on plaza decks, inside planter systems that are going to be covered with soils and landscaping effects. These are coatings that are highly resistant to ponding water. They can work well as a cool roof. They actually age very clean. They don't tend to hold organic material over time. Some of the downsides to your polyurethanes: high initial investment costs, susceptible to moisture in the substrate at the time of application. These coatings need to cure fully, and they're so good at holding moisture in top and bottom that if there is trapped moisture at all, when that substrate tries to heat up, if it's not fully cured, the gases will actually push through and cause pinholes in the polyurethane itself. So they can be very temperamental to the application time and the humidity in the air and in the system itself. And then they do have stronger odor. We talked about that earlier. Applicable building types for your polyurethane coatings: plaza decks, pedestrian walkways, vehicular traffic surfaces, systems underneath pavers, and then planters were often used. But a polyurethane certainly has a application in these type of areas. It might not be your most cost-effective solution for a typical roof coating area system. Moving into PMMAs. PMMAs are a two-part methyl methacrylate-based resin. What does two-part mean? It means it needs to be catalyzed with a second chemical to start its curing reaction. It cures very rapidly once it's been catalyzed, but it has to be catalyzed in a very specific way. And that's actually one of its challenges we'll talk about in a little bit. Some of the strengths associated with PMMAs, extremely durable. The primary place where we're seeing PMMAs used in today's market is in combination with a roofing membrane, where we're able to take a traditional modified or single ply roofing system and use a PMMA to flash difficult areas in combination with that. So we're eliminating things like pitch pans, M curbs, pourable sealer pockets, and we're using a resin flashing system to create these difficult flashings in a seamless method where there's no longer a maintenance item over time. These things work very well for waterproofing as planters, water features, plaza decks. So they have a lot of overlay with your urethanes from a usage standpoint, but they also bring a lot more flexibility into the mix in regards to being able to flash penetrations and difficult details on roofing systems. Some of the challenges, these are highly technical coating systems. They require a lot of expertise and craftsmanship to measure out proper amounts of catalyst to resin, to make sure that we have selected the proper primers, application methods, temperatures, and conditions are met to ensure long-term performance. PMMAs are often warranted and designed to go out past 30 years in conjunction with these roofing systems. So this is one of the most high performance systems on the market right now. Some of the other challenges, odor and high initial cost investment. But once again, when we look at that cost investment over a period of 30 years, or in a situation where mobilizing would be very difficult, meaning we have to shut down a plaza deck and inside a condominium, or we're going to be having to shut down and dismantle planters to rework them, that life cycle cost probably comes way down in comparison to other systems, but that initial investment is very high. Where we might see this, difficult flashings, plaza decks, waterproofing areas, and then those jobs where high mobilization costs are so high that it can justify and dictate high performance designs such as PMMAs.
I'm going to take a break here, and we have a few questions funneling in. So the first question we have is from Ricardo. Where do we stand in having either a bell chamber test or bonded pool test once the moisture survey is done and the roof assembly confirmed dry enough, especially for the Florida market? Richard, Niels, Clint?
We have a pull test that is performed. We have instructions for that that will ensure that we have proper adhesion to a certain roof membrane. And if we find that we do not have adhesion, we have a variety of different primers that can be used that are compatible with these products. So for the most part, if we can find a way to adhere our silicones to any type of roof substrate.
Yeah, that's a great question, Ricardo. And I'll further Nels's response. I think Nels's response is really geared towards how is the coating adhering to the existing roof system, where the question that was asked about bell chambers and bonded test really takes it back one step further in the roof assembly and is asking a question of, is the roof that we're adhering to actually stuck to a point to where, or mechanically fastened, is it engaging the structural deck to a point to where it can hold a storm? And, while that's not currently a code concern, I think it is a valid question to ask a building owner to say, okay, yeah, we can coat this roof today, and it very well could withstand water intrusion for the next 20 years. But is it currently strong enough to withstand the pressures that could be exerted from a storm? That's really a next level question that somebody should ask as a building owner, as a specifier, as a management company, to say, yes, we can coat it and it can provide waterproofing and moisture resistance, but does it currently stand the pressure from a storm at 170 miles an hour, 180 miles an hour? 150 miles an hour, whatever it might be in your local area. So it's a very good question. I think it's a question that should be asked in whether your goal is to understand how your roof would perform under a storm event in comparison to how it could perform from a weatherproofing standpoint. Those are really two different questions, and coatings do not solve a roof that can't perform in a wind event.
I think that's a good point, Clint. That's never really been part of the coatings industry, as whether the roof itself has been. So that is probably some wise guidance for property owners to make sure that the roof they want to restore is worth restoring, that it's adhering to the substrate.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a very insightful question. So we appreciate that. Moving into the next set of slides and going into polyurethanes, we're now starting to move into another category of moisture cured coatings. Polyurethanes are really used in these areas for pedestrian traffic decks, vehicular traffic deck waterproofing and coating applications. And the reason that we see them being used in these areas is primarily because of their durability and their strength, their ability to work in those scenarios. Like Nils had mentioned before, silicones are not meant to be walked on in service areas. The urethane coating is actually completely opposite of that, where it has extreme durability. It's often reinforced, and we see urethanes being used in areas that need that durability inside those traffic areas that can be really detrimental to your typical coatings. It's also still very resistant to ponding water. It stays clean and it works well. Some of the challenges that you see is in regards to cost. They do have a high initial investment, but for the long term and for the purpose of what they're needed for, they have a very proven track record in those areas. Odors inside the application types can be a concern. Applicable building types, we often see there's a lot of conversation about my beard, my new haircut. So I appreciate everybody taking notice of what I got going on, by the way. But no, we often see these being deployed in the concrete deck arenas, in plaza decks, at the condominium level, multifamily level. So for waterproofing underneath of pavers, inside planters, pedestrian and traffic vehicular decks. Moving on to the next slide, which is your PMMA. PMMA is just an acronym for its chemical makeup. PMMA resins are relatively new to the roofing industry. I think really C-Plast was the first company to commercialize PMMA resins as a flashing system and into a roofing system. Today's market, you see most of the major manufacturers producing a PMMA product. It's a two-part product. It has to be catalyzed. It's a flashing resin, and it's often reinforced. The primary place where we're seeing PMMAs used has a lot of overlap with the urethanes and the plaza decks and the planters, but we're also seeing it used as a hybrid coating system in conjunction with roof systems, where PMMAs are taking the place of pitch pans and other maintenance items that would come up on a roof over time, and now becoming a seamless integration into the roof around penetrations, tough flashing areas, and often where also being used where jobs with very high mobilization costs can justify a higher initial investment expense to kind of minimize the need to come back to that site. So we can get up to 30-year warranties with PMMAs. Some of the downsides are they are very technical. They require exacting amounts of catalyst to resin. They require specific primers to each of their substrates, and they have that high initial cost investment. But there is absolutely a place in the world for the PMMA market. And I think one big thing that we think everyone should really understand when we look at the four types of coatings that we're talking about today, and these do encompass the majority of the commercial coatings in the market, but every coating has its place, but not every coating is meant for every job. Acrylics are put on jobs often. We see them every day, and every week I get a takeoff that comes back from one of our offices around the state where an acrylic coating was put onto a roof with little to no slope, and there's nothing left in 1, 2, 3, 5 years. We see places where silicone coatings are put in place underneath encapsulated moisture, and we have blistering and delamination. You really need to look at what you're trying to achieve, and it ties right into this next slide, which is look at what you need to achieve on your project and find the product that fits the needs, and not necessarily just go apply an acrylic because it was $2 a square foot in a situation where it's going to fail in a, you know, a very limited amount of time. One thing that we do often liken this to is, acrylics are primarily there for reflectivity and solar protection. Being that they are water-based coatings, they're really not high performing products inside the moisture proofing, damp proofing arena, right? We can't put them in as a primary roof system on something that doesn't have adequate slope, but they're very good at reducing heat gain and extending the life of a roof that does have good slope. So we can come in here and use that and kind of put that in that reflectivity solar protection category. Conversely, we start talking about moisture proofing, creating a roof system per se on top of an existing substrate, and you start looking at the silicone systems that can absolutely be completely 100% waterproof in ponding water conditions and in low slope performance conditions. And same thing with your PMMAs and your urethanes. These can create roof systems that are waterproof on their own without the need for significant slope, positive drainage, etc. But all of these systems have a place. It's really about finding the right system that matches up to your needs. So here's just some restoration examples. I think there's a slide coming up that kind of talks about where we can use it. Nils mentioned it earlier. Metal roofs are wonderful candidates for coating applications. I will say there's a skylight in that metal roof right there, which we would never want to coat over without proper safety precautions. But with preparation, even exposed fastener metal roof systems, which you're seeing on the top left, we can prep those fasteners with mastics and flashing grade sealants, and then coat these roofs, get really an extended useful life, take a lot of heat out of some of the uninsulated warehouse spaces, so it can be a tool used for comfort of your factory or your warehousing, your building owners. And we're going to show a little bit of video now to keep this moving, and show some coating applications being put down with spray rigs in real time.
That was good, Clint. All the coatings that you guys are offering have very good qualities. They're all very different. They're chemically different. They have different elasticity. They have different use of solvents, and they absolutely each have their own particular place.
Awesome. We're going to jump into another poll here. How long can a coating extend the life of your roof? So you should have seen a polling pop up on your screen. We'll give it about 10 to 15 more seconds. We're getting a lot of different responses here. Good to see, and it's variable, right? I think as we're learning along here, it depends on the roof system, depends on the environment. So I have about 5 more seconds. We'll take responses, share those with everyone. So looks like the overall winner, 62%, said 20 years, 10% at 15 years, 20% at 10 years, and 8% at 5 years. So we're going to walk through how can you get a 20-year coating solution, and what's a 5-year solution. So to continue on, Clint.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Kevin. And I think, every answer up there is right. It's really about what the design that is being deployed on a roof, what kind of assembly is it being put on, and what the goals of the building is really trying to achieve. We can meet those warranties and extension times, but it all will come back to maintenance. I will say that coatings are very susceptible to maintenance needs over the life of their use, but coatings are not for every roof. It's a very valid point. What's your current condition? We want to ask these questions. How old is the roof, and what is its current condition? Does it have good slope? Is it ponding water? Are you trying to just extend the life or minimize heat gain? Does it have chemical exposure? Meaning, is it a kitchen exhaust? What are you doing to capture those discharges out of some of those food vents? And is it over an airport with heavy fuel dump from plane exposure? So a lot of good questions to ask. And one of the biggest questions is there moisture in the roof system? We can move on to the next slide. Which roofs can be coated? We've already hit on this. I don't need to spend a lot of time on it. Essentially anything that doesn't have a gravel surface can be coated. Moving into the moisture topic, how saturated is too saturated for building code? Because one of the biggest questions that we have to ask ourselves when designing these roofs is, is our substrate adequate? Do we have moisture trapped in the system? Take a minute to go ahead and answer this question. We'll get some results.
There's a poll, another poll question. If anyone hasn't seen it so far, looks like we got pretty good responses. Give it another 5 seconds. So Clint, looks like the overall winner is 25%. You want to dive into that?
Yeah, it's really a two-pronged question. There in 25% is one of the right answers. And that comes from Florida Building Code that basically says that no roof system can be replaced or repaired if any more than 25% of the area that's going for replacement is saturated with water. So if we had a 10,000 square foot roof section and more than 2,500 square feet was saturated with water per Florida Building Code, we wouldn't be able to just take that wet insulation out and then put a coating on. We would actually have to replace that and take that entire roof off. The second part of the question is more about moisture content and saturation levels. Florida Building Code specifies that no roofing assembly should be put over top of an existing roof that has more than 5% moisture by weight in the roof membrane and more than 8% moisture by weight in the insulation package. So as we go do that moisture survey that any good contractor would require and ask that you do before you put a coating on, if those results would come back and say, hey, we're more than 5% in the membrane or 8% in the insulation, those areas have to be taken out. And then we start asking the question, do those areas add up to more than 25% of the roof system itself? So very good questions to ask. And coming back down to the adhesion test, we want to know if it's going to adhere to that roof system. And then that next level question that was posed by one of the attendees, which is, is that roof system even strong enough to hold up in today's code? Surface preparation. What's one of the most important parts of getting a system done? It's preparation. It's washing the roof system to a cleanliness level that is adequate for the manufacturer. It's ensuring that the entire roof is prepped to the same standards that test was done in. That's one of the big things that we always talk about when in our quality control segment, which is we go out and do an adhesion test. Well, we clean a very small area. If that area is spick and span and we pass, but then we don't go prep the rest of that roof to that same standard, do we know if we're getting the same results? So consistency from the adhesion test prior to starting the job into the preparation standards that we use while we're putting on the system is very critical. Selecting the right primers and sealers. Richard's team can maybe chime in here a little bit, but there is a lot of manufacturer specific products that are primers and sealers out there. There's also third-party products that can be used in conjunction with other manufacturers' products to provide the best system for surface prep.
Nils, do you want to address that for a moment? Surface prep?
Sorry, my microphone was off. Yes, it is extremely important to get it clean because you adhere to the dirt. Of course, you're going to adhere as well as the dirt too. But one thing or a couple of things that are often ignored too, when you clean a roof and it's a flat roof, you got to make sure that you don't have a backwash so you contaminate areas that have already been cleaned. So there's some pitfalls there. And if you work with a detergent, of course, nothing is worse than a soap film. You get that contaminated the roof, and now nothing will stick to that. And another thing is, if you are under construction, you get contamination from people walking across the roof, dragging up things on their boots and such, and dropping pieces of their sandwich, etc., etc. So you gotta, throughout the project, make sure that this roof surface is kept squeaky clean for the next step.
And as we move into some of the tools that we're using to keep up quality control and make sure that installation is following the spec that's out there, gridding, we simply create a 10 by 10 grid, which creates one roof square. So we know that inside every 10 by 10 grid, we're putting a specific amount of product down inside those areas. Wet mill gauges show us how thick the product is when it's wet. And we'll talk kind of about the science of how we end up with dry mill gauges, dry millage, and how that translates from wet millage that's being applied by the applicator. Dry mill slit test, where we're simply cutting out a piece of that system using a caliper or a visual measurement tool to get a dry mill thickness, because your specifications will often specify both wet and dry mill testing and application requirements. Thermometer, not too critical in the Florida market, but the majority of roof coatings need to be 40 degrees and rising, some of them even 50 degrees and rising, to be applied from an application standpoint. And then hygrometer is often used to make sure there's not too much humidity in the air, which can be a problem for certain urethanes. Not enough humidity will cause moisture cured coatings. Coatings that actually need moisture to cure out, they'll cure very slowly without moisture in the air. So those are things that a qualified contractor is always looking at through application. Moving into another quick poll here. How many square feet will 1 gallon of coating cover? This is an interesting thing. I'm not sure I'm understanding our answers here. I think we might have a bit of an issue because we're asking for a square foot answer, but we have millage.
So the question should probably be is how much coating is 1 gallon, and a gallon would be 26 or 16 wet mils depending on the solids. So when you use an acrylic, there would only be somewhere around 12 mils left. When you use a silicone that's 100% solids, there would still be all 16 mils. Is that correct?
We can go ahead and move into the next slides and start talking a little bit about some of the science behind coatings. So, you know, what we're talking about is percentages of solids inside a coating. And what does that mean for when we put that coating down into one of our areas, 1 square? The majority of the commercial professional grade silicones in the market and tropical specifications are here are 95% solids or more. So if we put down 24 wet mils in one area, as it dries off being 95% solid, you'll still have 22 mils, almost 23 mils of product remaining. In comparison to your standard acrylic, acrylics are 50% solids by volume, meaning there's an enormous amount of solvents, whether those are water-based solvents or petroleum-based solvents. That would yield from 24 mils down to 12 mils of dry thickness. So there's a significant difference in how much product is actually left on your roof after it's being applied, not just from silicone to acrylic, but from manufacturer to manufacturer. You know, you could be getting a 5 gallon pail of an acrylic that's 30% solids, and it's actually 40% less product, and hopefully your prices coordinate similarly different. So something to look at. I'm going to turn it back over to Nils and Richard's team to talk about their products and some of the characteristics that they have.
Thank you, Quinn.
So this goes into 924 ETERNA-SIL, which is our workhorse for restoring roofs. That's a top coating we use with our silicone restoration system. And it's inorganic and solvent free. So most other roofing products, they're organic, either asphalt or plastic, and all organic matter breaks down from UV. Inorganic materials, those are things like glass and rock. And the formula or silicone is very close to that of glass. So in fact, we're taking a liquid applied flexible shield of glass to protect the roof. But also remember, this glass gotta be opaque to UV to do its job perfectly. The advantages, we have 50 grams, less than 50 grams per liter of volatile organic compound. That's the stuff that's so very bad for our environment. That's below all state requirements. There's no petroleum, no water in the product, and it's impervious to ponding water. And I see we got another poll popping up here. True or false, a coating would not be eligible for a 20-year warranty. So let's go ahead and answer that.
Looks like we got 85% false and 15% true. Want to talk a little bit about warranties?
Absolutely. So, the warranties of the coating systems, they basically mimic warranties available for commercial roof systems. Coating warranties, we have 5-year, 10-year, 15 years, and 20 years available. The commercial roofing systems, they go more 10-year, 12-year, and 20 years. But of course, we'll be happy to issue a 12-year warranty. For some reason, we're off track there. But the point is, you can get just as good warranty protection from restoring a roof as you can from replacing the roof. So all roofing warranties, they have some requirements there to maintain the warranty, and that there's a maintenance guideline you gotta follow. So make sure you read that maintenance guideline and have your contractor come up and inspect the roof and do the maintenance that is required. Next one. Next.
Julian, I think Julian was going to take this one. Julian, we can't hear you.
Apologies for that. Thanks everyone for joining our webinar about coatings. I'm Julian Olarte. I'm the service branch manager for advanced roofing for the Miami-Dade County and the Keys. Today we put together a cheat sheet for budgeting in terms of comparing re-roofing to coating a roof. So for the purpose of this exercise, let's assume a 20,000 square foot roof, and we are going to re-roof. So an average flat roof could be around the $13 square foot price range. So to re-roof that 20,000 square foot roof, it will be $260,000 that you will be investing on your property. And if we compare it, if you want to go with the option, as long as the roof is a good candidate to be coated, and we go with a silicone coating, which should be range around the $4 per square foot, you will be putting $80,000 compared to the $260,000. So a little bit more than 3 times less, and the time that you are going to spend doing that project is going to be 6 months if you re-roof compared to approximately 1 month. So you're going to spend much less time by doing so. But again, I want to enforce that the roof would have to be a good candidate to be restored with a coating. as what our audit panelists said. Once you do a restoration with a coating, what would be the next step as soon as you get your manufacturer's and your contractor's warranty? You have to get enrolled into a maintenance inspection program, not only because it's a requirement from the manufacturer, but also because this would make that the roof and that the coating that you put is going to perform as designed by the manufacturer. So basically, basic things that we go when we go to inspect and maintain a roof. First thing we look is that we don't have any debris on the roof. This would make sure that that the rain can flow easily, even though even if you put a coating that can withstand water, you want to minimize the amount of water on the roof. So basic things you look, make sure that debris is off of any drainage system. Internal drains, gutters, downspouts, that they are not clogged or have any impediment for the water to run. Then what we do, as Rob was saying at the beginning, the roofs tend to fail on the details. Those are the ones that require the most skilled installation. So these are the points that we focus the most. This would be like vent stacks, leg penetrations, parapet walls, base flashings. So usually what we do is we make sure that the roof is going to perform as when we initially installed. We treat, when we do the maintenance, we treat, if we are going to apply any coating, we treat it as if we were doing it for the first time. So what we make sure that we clean properly the surface. We make sure that we only not use the same type, but the same manufacturer coating that we used initially. That will guarantee that the product is going to perform and that the warranty is going to be intact. We do also inspect things like counter flashings, coping caps. We make sure that the integrity of those items is intact. When do we advise to perform the inspections? Before and after any major weather event like a hurricane, a storm, rainy season, or if you are going to take any major construction project, like replacing on any HVAC unit, any concrete restoration, any structural repair on your building. So always have an inspection before and after. Lastly, and manufacturers have designed a different color coding that in terms of maintenance, it's a great tool since buildings that have several HVAC units, they require a lot of traffic and we want to minimize that traffic. So they have come out with this one in the example. It's a high yellow reflectivity coating. So what we do is once the project is completed, we coat it, we broadcast some sand on it. So it protects your coating and gives you some traction and slip resistance. So any other trades can walk on the roof and do the service on the units. I would highly advise, if you're already invested on a coating, invest on a walkway pad. It will give you a great benefit. We do also have the same product could be used as a warning line around the perimeter of the roof just for safety reasons. And that's usually what we do when we do maintenance. Key takeaway in terms of service, please, if you do a project, always have an inspection program and a maintenance program in place.
Yeah, so again, I want to thank everybody. You know, again, I think we covered a lot today and we want to be available for everybody. We are big believers in coatings, provided they're done right. Tropical is a partner of ours. We're not exclusive to any one roof coating manufacturer. So we installed different manufacturers, but we just found that the reputation and the quality and standing behind what they produce has been very good with Tropical. I want to thank everybody for attending and be safe, and hope to see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you for having us very much.